Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Sal Abruscato to talk not about a pale horse named Death. Maybe we'll talk a little bit because I have a couple of questions for you about it. But to talk about you, the man, the artist, the musician. How's it going?
Hi. Good morning, Pedro.
It's a pleasure to have you on the channel. I really want to thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy working on a new record.
Yes, sir. But this is awesome. I wanted to do this. I just was a little bit inept with figuring out the Skype, as I was telling you. I'm a dinosaur, so.
you're a pale horse.
Yes, very pale.
So before we talk about the 5 albums that influence you, and even before we talk about how everything started for you as far as your music career goes, how's this new record coming along?
I got to say, it's probably one of the best records. I'm really ecstatic. The way the production is, the mix, the sounds, the writing, the songs. The material is pretty much a lot of it's been written in the last 3 months, and a lot of it, and then the rest of it was written over the course of when this pandemic started. I started around February a year ago. Yeah, I started sketching. I started sketching, recording these. I just start playing and recording these ideas, and then I start piecing things together and coming up with concepts and lyrical ideas and title ideas, working titles, and that kind of it's like a tree. I start out with a trunk, and then it branches out, and by the end, it's just this crazy song. It's going really good. We have this amazing new talented artist from Ireland that's done the album cover, which is I will definitely say this record is more. It's more devilish. It's even darker. It's more demonic. It's more. It touches just the titles alone, but the title of the album is very, very, very dark, and it actually depicts what people have gone through in the last year perfectly. And so I'm really excited. This is the 4th album, along with the 4th album coming out in 2021. This is also the 10-year anniversary that SPV released the first album, SPV Long Branch. So that's a big deal to me because this all started out as an idea on my couch in 2009 when I was just recording these first songs. And so I'm very excited about the fact that it's 10 years later. The first album's 10 years old. We're coming out with this 4th album. The artwork is killer. The music is killer. It really sets a new bar compared to the last record, and I'm really looking forward to people hearing this angle. It's still APHND. It's just as doomy as ever, but it's even more of a horror movie. It's even more of a darker story. So I just keep on pushing the envelope, and I pushed it a little bit even further as far as topics and subjects and things.
I was going to say, with your ability to find shades of darkness, I think you found even a darker shade of darkness.
I did. It comes at a price, though. My soul gets chipped away piece by piece. I keep on selling it piece by piece to the devil. So, yeah. No, it's just the way I see things. But I find beauty in darkness, and I also find enlightenment, because without darkness, you have no light. So I think that's why a lot of people sometimes find therapy in the music as well, because it takes you through these emotions, but then you kind of feel like you just vented out and got exercised, and you released all these inner demons by going through the emotions. So it's what I do.
That's one of the reasons why live music is so important, because we listen to the record at home. Like, I've seen you guys live, so like I've listened to the music at home, but seeing you guys live takes that ability to exercise those demons to a whole new level, because now you're not just doing it on your own, you're doing it in a group of people with the people that created the music. So there's this really interesting dynamic between between ourselves, the people around us, and then you guys on stage. And that is what's missing the most right now.
Look, let's face it. This pandemic, okay, this virus is real, but I also feel like politics and governments took it and ran with it, because without firing a single gun, they have crushed people globally into a form of restraint, dictatorship, and they crushed the human spirit. we're all walking around looking like robots now. No one has identity. Everyone's walking around like this outside. You know what I mean? The masks. It's yeah. It might be a little bit effective if you're really exposed to the virus, maybe. But I think there's more to it than we know, and we'll when we're old and dead and buried is when stuff will come out. This virus was an intentional thing, I feel, and it crushed the human spirit. Look what they took away. They took away all the enjoyments of humans. Like, you can't go to the park and go hiking, but you can go to Walmart and shop. You know what I mean? You can buy Amazon. You can support all these huge conglomerates, these monopolies, but you can't go fishing. You have states in the United States, the governor said you can't go fishing, or you can't go hiking. You can't go play in the playground with your kids outside. You got to stay inside, shut down, stay away from the vitamin D, because the vitamin D is what's good for you. Building your immune system is what's good for you. Staying inside weakens you more and more and more. As the saying goes, God made dirt and dirt don't hurt. It's okay to eat some dirt when you're a kid. It makes you strong. It's sad what's going on. And now they don't talk about all the suicides. They don't talk about all the people that have turned to drugs again because they're so depressed from being disconnected from people. For people going to concerts, it's like connecting to people and having that social gathering of everyone being on the same page and having a good time and expressing themselves and venting out their feelings and maybe being allowed to scream their brains out without having the cops called on them. Like, this is a form of therapy. Music saved me. I would have been in all sorts of trouble as a kid if I didn't get into playing instruments and striving to play a show at the local bar.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's so.
I'll tell you, I'm normally a pretty positive kind of person, but a year into this, and it's starting to get to me. I'm starting to lose a lot of my positivity because it's becoming harder and harder to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when you think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that light ends up being a train. So it's like I'm starting to really struggle. So for a person like me who's always very positive, always jovial, always joking, if I'm going through that kind of mental anguish at times, I can only imagine people that they're already in that state to begin with, how they're doing it now. But at least we have people like yourself who are making music and who make music, and at least allows us to have a little bit of an escape.
Trying, imagine the people that were totally manically depressed before this even started, or people that were already feeling suicidal before this started. Where are they now? They're not talking about it. So I hope I know that there's like a lot of bands and promoters that are trying to, like, they're announcing stuff for the summer. I don't know if that's going to be really possible.
I don't think it's realistic, to be honest with you.
I don't think it's realistic. I know when after discussing with my agent, we're looking at it realistically to start touring, do some touring February 2022. I'm waiting. We're all going to need the vaccine to be able to get around. You're going to need some kind of card to show that you got the vaccine. This is going to be the new, show me your papers. This is a new realm. It's a reset. This is a global reset, and they have literally stripped us of a lot of freedoms in a snap of a finger without firing one gun, without imprisoning one person. They have literally crushed us and there's people that literally shake in their boots in fear over getting the virus. The funny thing is me and Joe Taylor, one of the guitarists in the Pale Horse Named Death, we came home from Europe, and I'll tell you this real quick. In November of 2019, we came home from Europe. Now already this thing was brewing, this virus. We were in Milan. We were in places like that. And, me and Joe when we came home, we got sick. We were sick. I made it to the end of the tour, fortunately, because, of course, as a vocalist, your biggest fear is getting sick, because then you can't sing. But we were both laid up for a week in the bed. And then my wife caught something from me. Then my daughter caught something. And we just attained it to being a really bad cold. But we were talking, me and Joe, saying, you know what? We might have been like we might have had it already. We
You
might
guys
have
might have
already
been
had it and
patient
came
zero.
home with it. What?
You may have been patient zero.
Yeah, we might have been. Yeah, Joe said we brought it to America when we came back to Newark Airport from London, and you know, I don't know. I believe I rarely get sick. So, but I believe you need to have some kind of exposure to build your strength and your immunity. You need to have your vitamins. You need to have the sun, and you need to build strength. When you're sheltered all the time and hiding from nature, I feel you're weakening your immune system. So I don't think these people know what they're talking about. You got Bill Gates that is an authority on this. I mean, how is this guy an authority? The guy that created viruses for Windows and then sold you the antivirus for Windows. All of a sudden, he's speaking on TV as an authority when he has no medical degree. You got some batshit crazy people out there that have too much money and think they can rule the world, and that's part of that global elitist agenda. So, anyway, back to music because it's a
Back to
crazy
music,
world
yeah.
out there.
Let's talk about something a little bit more upbeat, if you will.
Yes, sir.
Before we talk about the list of the 5 albums that influence you to become a musician, let's talk a little bit about how it all started for you. How old were you when you picked up your first instrument? And was it the guitar or was it the drums?
Well, when I was 10 years old, I came home from an extended like sleepaway camp thing that I was sent to over the summer. And when I was at that camp, that was when I was first exposed to these older kids playing, you know, heavy metal, things like that. And I wanted to originally get a guitar. And I remember begging my parents I wanted a guitar, but it was like, no, 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 that's the devil's device kind of thing, because they were hardcore Catholics from Europe. And but I also wanted to play the drums. I was playing drums on the bucket, so it was like one or the other. And then one day we were passing by this little tiny rickety music store called Mr. Frank's Music on Quentin Road in Brooklyn. I mean, we're talking like hole in the wall type of place, real old school mom and pop shop. And they had this like little champagne drum set, sitting there used. And they got it for me. My parents got it for me. And so I started playing drums. I got my first drum set by the time I was 11. I think it was for my birthday. So, and that was the beginning of the end as far as how they saw it, because I drove my mother crazy. Because of
I was
course,
going to say, your neighbors must have loved you.
well, yeah, it was Brooklyn, so everything's tight. So every time I'd come home from school, right away play, and I would drive my mother crazy. I would drive everybody crazy, because of course, when you first start out, you're god awful, and you have to go from there. You have to start from somewhere. So that was pretty much the beginning of all of that. By the time I was 13, I was already like playing in some groups with kids and bands, and I was in a cover band, so I had done my first concert at 13 at the Marine Park Junior High School auditorium, and we did. I remember it was we did Iron Maiden, and then that year was like Metallica, Ride the Lightning came out. We did For Whom the Bell Tolls and all that stuff. So already between 11 and 13, I was there was this onslaught of music, because I one of the first records I bought was in 1980 was Blizzard of Oz, came out by Ozzy Osbourne, and I was 10 in 1980. And so I bought that record when I came home from camp, because that's what these kids were playing. And then after that, it was like I ran out and bought Black Sabbath, Paranoid, and it just went from there. And then I just started. There was this local music store on Avenue U in Brooklyn called Zigzag Records, which was like considered an import shop, that you would only find certain records you could never find at commercial record stores. Imports, real weird stuff, off the cuff stuff, but all the metal stuff they were selling when Metallica had their Kill 'Em All demo tape out. They were that was that kind of shop. It was a place that metalheads congregated at, and you would get the very first of anything. They consigned demo tapes from bands and they would sell them. And that was the beginning of me going knee deep right into it. And then I had formed with these two guys from school. We got into thrash metal, so we had formed a band called Toxemia, and we actually had this guy, this label, this tiny label, put out our first independent record in 1986, which was sold in this record store called Zigzags, and it was. I mean, I was literally 16 when my first.
That must have been really cool, right? Like you were going to the store to buy music, and then suddenly, like something that you made, it's there.
Yeah, it was there, and that was a big highlight, you know. But of course, it was hard to get other people to understand that highlight, you know, when you're a kid. At the same time, when I did that, let me backtrack a little bit. It has to do with one of the reasons why I picked one of these bands as my influences. Up the block lived a friend of mine who I was taking drum lessons from, and I started taking drum lessons from him when I was 13. His name was Louis Beato, and I was like, he was like an only child, so but he was a lot older than me. He was like 8 years older than me. But he was like the bomb in the neighborhood as far as a drummer. And he happened to be the drummer in a band called Carnivore. First it was Fallout, and then it was Carnivore. So I became like his little buddy. So he would give me lessons. He would come to my house because we lived literally an avenue apart from each other. And he would come to my house, give me lessons, and then I would then go out with him and go to his band practice. And his band practice, right, Carnivore's rehearsals, they would rehearse in Peter Steele's basement on East 18th Street. And that's how I met Peter. And I met Keith Alexander, who was the original guitarist as well. So I was like this little kid, like not a little kid, but you know, this teenage kid that was like 8 years younger than those guys, being totally enthralled by watching this band rehearse. And it became a regular routine thing. And then, you know, Louis took me a few times to roadie for him at his shows. And that's how I got to meet guys from Manowar. They used to open up for Manowar all the time. And they used to open up for, like, play with these bands like Cro-Mags at CBGB's. And I got like right away at a very young age, I was surrounded by these musicians that were all a little older than me. And that was the beginning of me actually excelling as a kid musician, basically taken off, because here I am being exposed to these older guys that were already good players, and they were
And that's the best school when you think
they
of it.
were on the rise, and that's how I met. You know, I met, like then Louis did a guest appearance on an Agnostic Front album, Cause for Alarm, which to me was like the best album, and Peter did a lot of writing on that record for them. And there's some amazing, and I then was all of a sudden hanging out with Louis doing Agnostic Front stuff, going to the shows, watching him play in Agnostic Front because he filled in for a little while. And I'm this kid trying to avoid not getting killed in CBGBs while there's boots flying everywhere. And I'm just like in this corner, like, and it was an amazing experience to be exposed to all these cats. You know, they were just like, and I was like the envy of my neighborhood with all the kids that were my age playing instruments, because they were like, you know, who does this guy think he is? He gets to hang out with these like big time musicians of the neighborhood, you know? And that's how it progressed. It progressed. It progressed. It progressed. And by the time I was like 17, 18, I was already becoming like, I was coming into my own. And what had happened was in 87, Carnivore had disbanded. And I had already had a friendship with Peter as well. He always used to give me little gifts and things and pins, and you know, I was just like a huge fan of Carnivore. I just loved it. My mother was always thought it was blasphemy, me blasting it in the room, and that's how my relationship started to blossom with Peter. Because I was instructed by Louis, I was like his little protege. I kind of emulated Louis' style and became this next generation of that style. And we got together. I asked Peter if he wanted, like, hey man, you want to just hang out and jam? You're not playing anymore. I went to his house, and it's kind of how it started with that. So that's why Carnivore is one of my when we get to the influence.
And before we talk about that record, I just want to ask you this: did you have a sense of how lucky you were to be in the right place at the right time at that age, to have that kind of people surrounding you, to give you this school of hard knocks lessons in life and in music?
Yes and
Or do you
no.
look back now and realize now how lucky you were then?
I would say yes and no, because again, when you're a teenager, you're an idiot. You're like just thinking it's a good time and you're having a good time. But I also knew I did know I was being exposed to something based on the reaction of already at a young age. I was developing a lot of haters. Like there was kids that were just hating on me because I was privileged in a way to become friends with these guys that were older than me, and musicians that were already playing shows every week at L'Amour's and CBGB's, and they were drawing a lot of people, and so I look back and I consider myself extremely fortunate to have even been in that environment, because it has a lot to do with the musician I had become, and the musician that I still am today, even to this moment of this material that I write, is so influenced by that back then. And so along with the infatuation of the other influences I listed, because again, um, I feel it's very important also, and I knew it back then too, because at a young age, I was liking different stuff. You do need to be a well-rounded musician to be a good musician. You can't be closed-minded and just think life is all about one type of genre to be a good writer or a good musician.
So that takes me to the first album of your list of five albums, and that is Carnivore Retaliation from 1987. This was their second album and final record. What was it about this record?
I loved the first record. I thought the first record was great, but they had done, because they were exposed during that time, that was when they were exposed to a lot of these hardcore bands, and Peter was exposed. They were playing a lot with these guys, these other bands, the CBGBs, and then Louis was involved with our Agnostic Front at the same time with this record. The crossover that they did, they weren't entirely hardcore, they weren't entirely thrash, they weren't entirely metal. The crossover that Peter did, and the to me, like I mean, that record has like the best vocal performance of aggression. His lyrics are just out of control, off the hook. He had so much to say. The musicianship of all three members of that band was off the hook. That when I was already hearing that material in their rehearsal spaces, because then they were rehearsing at a garage they rented in Brooklyn. It's on Cortelyou Road, and I was already hearing this stuff in the works, and I was already like, "Whoa, this is a whole new level of heavy," because Peter was incorporating the Black Sabbath, the bending, the John Bonham style of drumming that Louis had, combined with the metal double bass playing, and combined with the aggressive guitar playing and vocals. But yet you would have these moments that would stop, and the sky would drop. It would just fall out of the sky with these slow, heavy breakout parts, these bridges, and the bends, and that's where I started getting like, wow, this is mud honey. This is the ultimate syrup I ever had, and I was so hooked on that record from the moment they were working on the material. And then I remember getting like Louis giving me the vinyl when they first got their box of vinyl, and I was playing that thing day and night, and to this day I regard that record as like one of the 10 commandments. Like it's one of those records that if I'm pissed off, I listen to it if I have a chance. I also refer to that record so many times about just the writing on that record, the arrangements, the haphazard moments that all of a sudden it would just drop down and cut into halftime. And that was already the beginning of like this whole mixing super slow with super heavy. That was the beginning with Peter's style of writing, and it captivated me. And to this day, I hands down that record should have been huge. to me, that record should have like put them on the map even more so. It should have gone platinum. It was at that time maybe a little bit underrated versus other metal bands because it was such a mixture. Is just hands down for me one of the best records, period, in metal.
I think it came a little bit ahead of its time.
It was ahead of its time, and a lot of these bands can't hold a candle to it.
Yeah, people weren't really ready for that.
Oh, it was just like boom. It just punched you right in the face. And the lyrical content threw people off. I mean, as a young Typo Negative, when we were in Europe, we caught some flack for that content. And when we were touring for the first time in Europe, so we had a lot of problems. And but Peter was he was so shock and awe. He loved pushing people's buttons, just like the rest of us do. We just like getting a reaction, and he was maybe he was captivated by the subjects, and he was like, ooh, here's my moment to make people freaking lose their minds, and so
that's rock and roll, though.
That's rock and roll. Rock and roll. It's been the devil's music since the 50s. So
yeah. And speaking of way back, not the 50s, but way back, another album on your list is Black Sabbath, their debut album. By the way, I don't know if you realize this, but February 13th, it's 50-year anniversary since the album came out. 50 years.
Yeah. That's why it means so much to me, because I turned 50 back in July. So.
I wasn't even born when the album came out. And the incredible thing about this record is 50 years, still iconic today.
Oh, yeah, because again, that record did the same thing like Carnivore Retaliation did. They crossed so many boundaries, even with just the album cover, having a woman that looked like she came out of the Salem witch trials. Blurry, a little bit
blurry,
obscure,
yeah.
You couldn't really see clearly her face, the green tint. The album cover was like so simple yet so suggestive of what they crossed boundaries that made people lose their minds. They were branded a satanic band back then, and they loved it, and it got them the attention they wanted, and it got them problems too, like any band pushing the edge. But if you listen to the playing on that record, and again, the subject matter, and for me, that record has one of my favorite Ozzy Osbourne vocal tones. I really, really liked when he was doing the low register, more baritone, thick, kind of bluesy vocal tone that he had on that record. I mean, the high stuff he got into in Sabotage and Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath was great. It's very hard to do. Not anybody can do that. But I really was attracted to, it's one of my favorite vocal performances because it was so natural and so just thick. It was a real thick tone and very attractive, and it went with the music very well. So, and then you hear like Geezer Butler's bass solo and NIB and Fairies Wear Boots. But then I like all the obscure songs like, Behind the Wall and The Sleeping Village and the songs that weren't as popular on side B. There's some great hooks in some of those moments, and the record that was one of like the second records I got, when I was a kid after Blizzard of Oz, and it has a lot to do with the metal bands of today, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, that record started everything. I don't care what anybody says, but that's the beginning.
Led Zeppelin is great too. Led Zeppelin's one of my favorite bands too, but Led Zeppelin was still more user-friendly as far as lyrical content, pushing the envelope, the dark side, all that good stuff. Sabbath came out like, oh yeah, here's what we got. And they really gave bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple a run for their money. And just the mere fact that Iommi plays the way he plays after having his fingers severed at an accident and having plastic tips that he made. I mean, that there it shows an amount of character and determination of, I'm going to do this. And just the riffing that he did. And again, nobody was doing bends like they did, and it's just hands down, it's up there for me.
The other album on your list, you have two Black Sabbath albums on your list. So the next one is Paranoid, which they released in the same year.
Yeah,
Like,
it was a 1-2 punch.
yeah, imagine that now, a band releasing like 2 albums within a 1 year span. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
There seems to be a lack of prolific artists in today's day and age. You know, for some reason, people seem to, unless they're plagiarizing it, I think people have a hard time. People are a little bit too distracted these days by all these wonderful devices and social media. They're too busy with all that stuff than sitting there and working on music and writing poems and lyrics and things. But Paranoid was a 1-2 punch. I mean, that record came out, and that was the one that really got them noticed. You know, Iron Man was like, you know, their commercial hit song, I guess you could say. Believe it or not, it was like, I liked it as a kid a lot, but for me, it was War Pigs. And that was, I'm sorry, that was the record that had Fairies Wear Boots. The first one was Wizard. I mixed the two up. So Fairies Wear Boots is a killer riffing song, killer drums. Always tried to play it on the drum set when I was a kid. Bill Ward's one of my, Bill Ward, John Bonham, Neil Peart. Those guys were like my favorite drummers, and Louis Beato, of course. So, I think that was the record that broke them out, into becoming a big band.
I bought the vinyl 2 years ago at a flea market, like original pressing from 1970, original pressing.
Yeah, it's a big
and
deal.
When I brought it home to play it, the side A was so played that it was so scratchy. And then when you flip it over to side B was like they never played it. Whoever owned that vinyl before, they must have been a huge fan of side A. They only listened to War Pigs and Iron Man, and then they just keep going back to it because side B was not played at all.
Right, I believe side B, Fairies Wear Boots, is the first song on side B, right? So, the Planet Caravan is cool, it's trippy. There's a lot of good stuff, and again, they were cutting edge for heavy metal. They laid the foundation down for what's going on today.
Another album on your list that I thought was really interesting was the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper.
I'm a big Beatles fan. I would have listed more records, but I had to pick one. For me, I mean, Sgt. Pepper's, the White Album, Yellow Submarine, Magical Mystery Tour. Like I said, I would have listed more if you would have given me more space. I to this day, and I had up until recently the Beatles channel in my vehicle on the Sirius satellite. They are probably the best, along with George Martin, their producer, the best lyricists, composers, an unmatched talent that no one's been able to come out with to this day. No one has matched their ability of songwriting. I watch sometimes feverishly these YouTube videos of them in the studio, just how they work, how it just, you'll have these musicians that'll get stumped, like they'll get stumped, like they can't, they don't know what to do. These guys never had, like, these guys just, and when it comes to songwriting, that's who I feverishly analyze and listen to influence my songwriting, based on arrangements, like haphazard, out of nowhere changes maybe, or being free spirited with writing lyrics, because sometimes people get they get that tunnel vision when they're writing lyrics, and they'll be like, how do you I have a hard time writing lyrics and this and that. And it's like, well, you just got to just open your mind and not pigeonhole yourself. Another important thing is also just it helps to be quick-witted. It helps to be play with the words like an art, rather than just always telling an exact story. I like telling a story in a vague way, so that allows me to bring in all kinds of words. Mm-hmm. And Beatles, hands down, probably one of the influence for me as a songwriter, and honing the songwriting craft, because it is a craft. It is an ability that, you got a lot of great players out there that can be good cover guys. You got players there that are good musicians, but there's a difference between players that can play and players that can write songs and convey emotion that can touch people and affect them that way. So that's a whole nother world. And so anyone that dogs the Beatles, or any musician that says the Beatles suck, is a complete imbecile, because you're missing the point. Okay. Uh, you can be heavy, really heavy, without having all the time distortion
Yeah,
blaring in your face. The words are heavy. The emotion that
the
it
emotion is
conveys is
heavy.
heavy. And when I listen to the lyrics, and you go from song to song, and you just listen to the ability that these guys had, it's just unreal. And it's a shame that, two of the members have passed on. You got the other two that are getting very, very old. And look at all these wonderful musicians that have passed on, like Bowie, Prince. Um, there's no one to replace them. These kids, these young kids I see are I haven't been blown away by anybody yet. New. And it's not because I'm old. I have a very keen ear, and I'm very good at dissecting music when I hear it. And I'll hear these playlists or whatever, these things going on, or I'll see something on a feed, a new band pushing something. I go check them out, and I'm like, it's cool, it's good, but it's not doing it. It's not different. It's not pushing anything. It sounds like everything else that's going on. You're on that train of appeasing the masses because you think that's how you're going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that's what sells.
and that's unfortunately what that's how it is. That's the machine. But I think I know that hopefully young people out there do refer to these older records and dissect them the way I did, and do, because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. See, today we have Pro Tools. We can piece everything together. These guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, the tape is rolling, and they dropped it, and they did it, and they'd have to do another take, and they'd have to do another take. Um, so yeah, Beatles, big, big. I love them. I love them. I can listen.
I'm a huge fan of the Beatles, and also of John Lennon. When he
Oh
started
yeah,
his solo stuff, like I was just really into it. I couldn't get enough of it. I'm with you. I think a lot of people in the new generation, for them, Heavy is a song that's brutal, brutal vocals, brutal guitars, brutal drums. That's heavy. To me, a track could be heavy with you not even talking. Like an instrumental track could be heavy and be very melancholic and very melodic and still be heavy, because there's more to music than loudness. You know what I mean? Like
right.
there's other levels of heaviness as far as I'm concerned.
You're
And
correct. You're
and
absolutely
lyrics and
correct.
emotions to me play a huge role, because that's the songs that stay with you, because you can listen to a very heavy track, or a track that has a lot of catchiness to it, and it's a good song, but songs that stay with you years and years and years and years and years down the road, then it's a sign that that track was built the perfect way.
Right, exactly. And not to change the subject, but if you ever have free time, being that you said you like Lennon's solo work, there's YouTube videos of him working in the studios in New York when he was living in New York with these musicians that are off the hook, and even George Harrison does stuff, and you just got to listen to the way the guy knows every instrument and kind of tells everybody what's going on and what to do, and what a again what a master writer, composer. And the Beatles was like, a lot of bands will have that one guy that's got all that stuff. The Beatles was like all four of them. I mean, even Ringo, he's underrated. Ringo had a lot to do with a lot of stuff. And but you put John Lennon and Paul McCartney and George Harrison, and you got three guys that on their own are huge.
I
And
agree.
it was such a formidable attack on the senses.
Yeah,
They just
it's almost like they were like a super band before there were super bands, but there was
exactly.
just a band that started already as a super band. You know what I mean?
They had no idea what they had done. They were just already like exactly a super band with four amazing musicians that just and again, a lot of it has to do with their producer George Martin. He was the fifth Beatle. He did push the envelope. He was the one that convinced them to bring in orchestral elements into their music, and they were scratching their heads at first. You're like, what? But boy, did that make the sound huge and heavy. So
I
on
agree.
to the next. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
So the next, the last album on your list of 5 most influential albums is Led Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin 4.
Yeah.
So what about this record versus the other Led Zeppelin records? What made this one special for you?
Well, again, I like the Beatles. I could have listed a bunch more, but you gave me a short list. 5 is a small number. The reason why I decided to put down Led Zeppelin 4 was because I had that record on cassette, and I had it in a radio set up behind my drum set. And every day, what part of my regimen of practicing was would play the Misty Mountain Hop, which was the first song on side B. See, I'm a side B guy. Everybody
You
wanted
like the
Black
obscure
Dog.
stuff. You like the obscure stuff.
Yeah, everybody was Black Dog, Black Stairway to Heaven, which is like, all right, enough with that. It's a great tune, but I liked all the, Four Sticks, Misty Mountain Hop, all the weird stuff that like just again, John Bonham's playing, the musicianship on that record had come to such fruition. But again, I'm a big fan of Led Zeppelin 1. I'm a big fan of all the records. There's all, I can't list them all though, but I chose that one because that one brings me back to my childhood of when I was 11 years old. Because I had this boom box like we had back in the day, in the early 80s. In the late 70s, we had these boom boxes, something that these kids of today don't know what it is. It's not an iPod. It's a boom box. It was the coolest. The bigger it was, the cooler
Yeah,
you
the
were.
better it was,
So
especially if you had 2 tape decks on it.
Yeah, I had the dual decks, and part of my thing was along with playing, Sabbath or some. I missed that Misty Led Zeppelin 4 cassette was right there. I'd put it on. I would play along to that song, especially the most. So that record instantly brings me. That was the first record I had actually by them, also. So that instantly brings me back to my childhood, and that's why I put that record on. Again, the writing is phenomenal. The production, the sound of the drums, the sound of Jimmy Page's guitar, the vocals. Robert Plant was really sharp on that record. He was really good, and again, he's one of those vocalists though that I did like his performance on Led Zeppelin 1 because he was more bluesy, and I liked that bluesy vibe. So I could list a few more, but I chose Led Zeppelin 4 for
That
that
one hits the
reason.
spot for you.
Huh?
That one hits the spot for you.
It brings me back to when I was a kid sitting on that little drum set, and yeah, brings me back. Life. You realize, when you're a kid, you got those old people saying, cherish your youth. You're very wealthy with youth. You're rich in youth. And then when like, yeah, whatever, old man. Whatever. I'm cool, man. I'm going out. And then later on, you say, well, they're right. And then it's that full circle again. And, I tell my kids the same thing now. So it's.
Yeah, I do the same with my kid. I hear myself. I don't know if this happens with you, but I hear my parents through me
Of
talking to
course.
my son. It's
Absolutely.
like, holy shit, like I've gone full circle. Now I'm like my dad talking to my son the way my dad talked to me.
Absolutely. It's perpetual.
Life is funny that way. Life is really funny that
It's
way.
a big wheel. It's a big
Yeah,
wheel.
but one of the great things about music, and when you talk about your favorite albums, is that all of them represent a snapshot of where you were at that time. And when you listen to them now, it's almost like you're traveling through time to where you were then when you listen to them at that point. To me, I feel that way. I remember, and it doesn't matter where I am. If a Rise from Sepultura pops in, and it doesn't matter where I am, I'm taken back to my bedroom when I was a kid with a little tape that a friend brought over, and I
Yeah.
went and we put it on and we press play for the first time. It's just incredible. It's a time machine. Music is a time machine.
It is time capsules. And that's to me why I feel it's still important, because we go through these emotions like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to continue. I want to quit. I want to do this. I want to do that. There's so many other things I want to do. And then all of a sudden it's like full circle, like, no, I got to do another record. I can't just end like this. It's always that battle we have inside ourselves sometimes. Um, Especially, I'm sure a lot of people went through that with the pandemic, but I feel like every time for me personally, if I can put out a record, it's one more time capsule that even after I'm long gone, uh, my grandkids hopefully might be able to dig it up and say, wow, man, Grandpa, he was crazy. He's nuts, you know, like check the stuff out he was doing, you know, and the future generations might be able to go back. I don't know what kind of format we'll have in the future. Um, you know, especially
I think it allows you as a musician to become a little bit immortal as well, because your
right,
music will never die.
right. You know, David Bowie, forever immortal. I'm a huge Bowie fan. I would have liked to put him down as an influence as well, but you gave me a short list. Next time, give me like 10.
Next
And
time, more.
so, like Bowie, he's forever immortal because you listen to his music, you listen to Ziggy Stardust, you know, you can, and people always can become new fans of someone like Bowie when they hear it, right? I just had a guy write to me the other day, like, you know, I just discovered you guys now in 2020, and I love your first record that came out 10 years ago, right? So that's I think that's always happening because people are always, you know, searching. They're always, or their friend turns them on to something, or something pops up somewhere on iTunes. So it does make you somewhat immortal, and I feel like I do feel that I could live on um, by just constantly leaving all these little marks,
Nuggets.
yeah, nuggets of life where I am. You know, I did this record at this age, I did this record at that age. And this goes for all the bands I worked in, you know, and you know, same thing. Like, you know, you go back in time and you look at, you know, these other, you know, other bands I worked in. You see that record. Oh, that was, you know, Sal was really young there, and you know, I mean, I was 19 when I did Slow, Deep, and Hard, Typo Negative. I mean, when I hear myself playing on that record, I'm like, wow, I could never do that now. I mean, I'm doing such fast double bass playing and such hardcore kind of drumming. I was so quick, and I was 19, turning 20. You know, when I did that record, I was, you know, that's what they bring to me. I think about Bloody Kisses. I was 23. You know,
Wow.
so it's moments in time.
Moment in time, yeah. I agree with you 100%. Well, Sal, thank you very much for your time today. I know you had a very, very, very busy schedule, so I
got a
really
hot
appreciate
date. I
you
got a
taking
hot
the
date
time.
with my wife. We finally got a babysitter, so I'm gonna me and my wife. We're gonna go out because we have 3 kids, so it's crazy. So I have a hot date later, so I'm gonna get ready for that. I'm gonna continue working in the studio a little bit. You
I
know,
love it. I love it.
yeah, man.
You're the best. You're the
You
best.
gotta enjoy la vida. You know,
You gotta enjoy the little things.
yeah, you
You
know,
gotta
the
enjoy
little
the
things,
little
because these things, I see my kids growing up already so fast, and it's everything's whizzing by. So that's why I felt I got to do another record, and I still want to go on stage. You know, and we'll talk later on in another interview about the
Yeah,
changes that
yeah,
I
yeah.
have
I
going
told you
on
this
and stuff.
before. This is just an appetizer. Once the
Yeah,
album is about to come out, we'll set up something and we'll chat about the new record.
I promise I'll know how to work this better.
You have to.
Maybe I'll upgrade to the Zoom.
You'll upgrade to Zoom. Yeah,
I'll
I can
upgrade
see
to
that.
the Zoom, you know. I'll
You'll have time to practice all the technology to get ready for the interviews as the album comes out.
yes.
All
Don't
right,
force
Sal.
me to do it.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. All the best to you and your loved ones.
Thank
And we'll
you.
chat again once the album is ready to come out.
Absolutely. You got it. You
All
got
right,
it.
take care, man.
Bye-bye.